Hi folks, my name is Charles E. Diering. I was born in St. Louis, February the 5th, 1923. That's a long time ago. And so I'm a real native St. Louisan. And in grade school, we as kids formed our own little teams to play different sports. We played baseball. We formed baseball teams in our neighborhood. Well, also we played hockey in the streets, and that was the things we had to do when we were a young kid. And when I graduated from grade school, I was sent over to they call Blewett High School, but that school was so far away from my house, I was allowed to transfer to Beaumont High School, and that was in 1941. When I graduated from that school, I attended Beaumont School for 3 years, and the sports I participated there was baseball. That's where I excelled at there. And then in baseball, the American Legion team picked me to play with them for a couple years. One was with the Cardinal Scout, and another one was a St. Louis Brown Scout, and they were both big league teams in the city of St. Louis. But I chose the St. Louis Cardinals for one reason. The Cardinal Scout's son and I, we grew up together from grade school on, and we played baseball together, and his dad was teaching us all the basic fundamentals, so I thought, well, it was no more than right that I signed with the St. Louis Cardinals. But when I graduated in 41 of June, I signed my contract, and they sent me down to play in Class D baseball in Daytona Beach, Florida. But the season was already almost over, and I had a month or so to finish up down there, and that's where I finished that first half year of professional baseball. So in 1942, I reported to the spring training camps for the minor league teams, and I was assigned to a Class D contract there, and I made the team, and they sent me to Albany, Georgia, and there's where I put in a full year of baseball as a professional. And on that team, the Cardinal team, we had Red Shandy. He and I were starting out our careers there, and there was a couple other ball players that went up in the big leagues from there. And then after the 42 season was over, I signed a contract with Uncle Sam. I didn't want to sign it, but I had to. And so I spent 3 years, 1943, 1944, 1945, and I came home in 46, the first part of 46. So I put 3 years in a World War II time of my life. So when the 1946 season came along, I went to spring training. The St. Louis Cardinals assigned me to a Rochester team, which was our AAA farm club, and that was the club was just right under the major league club, the St. Louis Cardinals. But with all the boys coming back from the war, we had 80 guys that were trying to make this team up there, which they only carry 25 players, and they paid us on a scale of, if you stayed the first month, you got so much, second month so much, and if you stayed all year, you got so much money. So I had a good year. I was really a good defensive outfielder. I could go get the ball, I could run, and I could throw. I was good in the aspect. I was just a decent hitter. I was no big home run hitter. Heck, I was only I think 150-pound kid back playing ball then. But I had a good year up there. I think I hit 260 and was one of the top center fielders in the league. And so when that season was over at 56, came home. When we had to earn a living, you didn't make much money. I think I made $300 a month salary there, so you had to come home, you had to find a job. So I ended up working for Famous and Bar that year, worked in a warehouse, and I think I made $10, a dollar a day, something like $10 a week. So I did that all that winter of '56. So in '57, spring training come along. I belong yet to their Rochester AAA Farm Club, and the Cardinals, they signed me to their big league club to have spring training with them. And at that time, the St. Louis Cardinals just won the World Series in '56. But their club was getting old, just like the Cardinals are right now. Their team is getting old, some of these old players they got. But back then, you had a team together for usually 6, 7, 8 years, which was a long time, but you were a team. And those guys were all aging, and the guy that was playing center field was Terry Moore. And he was really a great outfielder. He played on, I don't know, maybe one or two World Series teams. But his legs were going. And I had a real good spring training, and like I say, I was one of the top defensive outfielders in the game. And the Cardinals bought my contract in '47. I stayed with them all of '47. And then that season was over. Again, I had to find a job. At that time I liked automobiles, so I started selling cars as an automobile salesman. But then spring training came along again for '48. I still belonged to the Cardinal Big League Club, and I stayed with them all spring training, but then they had to cut down to 25 players, and there was 2 men that were on that, what we say, the bubble. That was Joe Medwick, and I don't know, most of you people won't know who Joe Medwick was, but he was one of the greatest ball players that the Cardinals had in that era. But he was older, and they wanted a guy that could hit home runs, so they farmed me back out to Rochester. So I played all of 1948 with the Rochester club. And then when our season was over, the Cardinals brought me back to the parent club, and I finished out with the Cardinals in 1948. Then went to spring training in 1949. I was with the Cardinal club, and I had a good year there. I played center field regular for them. I hit .260, and I still was one of the top center fielders in the game. And we got eliminated from winning the pennant that year by the last day of the season. So I had a good year there, and I have established myself as a good defensive ball player. So when I finished in 48, 49, I was with the Cardinals in 1950. I played with them all in '50. I played with the Cardinals all in '51. And then in the winter of 1951, the Cardinals made a trade. They traded Max Lanier and I to the New York Giants, and they got Eddie Stanky from that club and made him the manager of the Cardinals. So I was a New York Giant member in 1952, and I think the reason why they picked me up is Willie Mays was their center fielder there, and everybody knows who Willie Mays is, or they should know. He's in the Hall of Fame and one of the great home run hitters and outfielders in the game. And I wasn't sure why, but he has some kind of a situation. He might have to maybe go into service. But now he didn't go into the service, and they sent me back down into their farm club in 1952. And went to Minneapolis, which was a AAA farm club. Again, I was one of the top defensive outfielders in the game, and I hit .260, .270 in that year. And it ended in 1953, and St. Louis Browns were in St. Louis. That's at that time, in that era, we had 2 clubs, the St. Louis Cardinals and St. Louis Browns. But the St. Louis Browns were going bankrupt, so the Baltimore town bought the St. Louis Browns, and they called them the Baltimore Orioles, and they went to 54 in Baltimore. And they bought my contract from the Giants for, I think, for $25,000 to play center field in a huge football stadium they had up there. So I joined the Orioles in 1954, and I played center field for that team. Again, one of the top center fielders in the game there. I hit real good. I hit 260. In fact, that year, the town was awarding a most valuable player prize for the most valuable player and most popular player. They was awarding a new Cadillac automobile. Well, the town really fell in love with the way I played the game, and I thought, hey, I got a good chance to become the most popular player, and I might win a new Cadillac. You know, so I was sitting in a dugout there, and then come out and they said, and the person that is the most valuable player is Chuck Diering. So I've got that trophy. It's in my trophy case there, and I'm number one for the MVP, and Bob Turley, which he turned out to be a fantastic World Series pitcher for the New York Yankees, he won the Cadillac. I said, well, he don't have the Cadillac now, but I've got my trophy. So I played with the Orioles 54, 55, 56, and then in 56 the Orioles, they sent me to the Montreal club. They sold my contract to them, which was a AAA club in the International League, and I finished out that year in 56 there. And when the season was over, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was no youngster no more for baseball then. I was 32 or 33 years old then, so really I was at the end of my career. But I put 17 years in a professional baseball career, so that was a long career. So I didn't know what was going to happen to me in 57, but then the Cardinals were needing a center fielder again. And I called up Frank Lane, and he was the general manager of the club that time. I said, Frank, I'd like to try out for the Cardinal club for center field. He says, well, Chuck, we know you're a great center fielder, but we want to get somebody that can hit 280, 290, hit 10 or 15 home runs. You hit 10 or 15 home runs back then. You were quite a home run hitter. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll sign you to a contract. And so I went to their AAA farm club in Omaha. But I went there, and I wasn't in any shape to play. They were already playing the season, and I wasn't quite the defensive player that I was used to be. And then they, in turn, released me, not outright, but sold my contract to Vancouver, which was a AAA farm club in the West Coast out there in the California area. And that's where I ended up my career there in 57. So I asked them in Vancouver, do you want me to play in your team next year? She said, probably so, but during the course of the year, they sold my contract back, I think, to the Cardinal organization in Louisville, which was AAA and American Association, but they only offered me $1,000 to play if I made the team. And I talked to my wife. I had a family, and I was at that stage right now, and $1,000 seemed like a lot of money, but it isn't a lot of money when you have a home that you got to pay for in St. Louis, and you got to rent a home in Omaha or in Louisville, wherever you're going to play. And I would really go in the hole by the time they paid the tax, and I retired. So when I retired, and I didn't know what I was going to do, I still liked car selling. And this one man that I ran into, and we became buddies in the sales field, he said, what are you going to do when you get out of the baseball business? I said, I'd like to go in cars. He says, okay. He says, we can get a Edsel franchise. And that was a new car that they were bringing out. They said, we got it? Yeah, we got it. They'll give us one. So we were looking around for a place to open up in St. Louis, and we run into another man who wanted to go into car business. So we formed 3 guys, and then we start looking to establish our dealership. But in the meantime, we run into a man from Ford, and there was a Ford dealer for sale in Alton, Illinois. We went over and looked at that dealership, and we said, well, that's a going business, and we can go in it right away. He says, you can go in it right away. So we end up eventually buying that Ford dealership. So that was 1957. Almost 58, I became Chuck Diering Ford Sales over in Alton. And that's where I finished my life. I stayed over there for 23 years as a car dealer. We had different franchises. That was Ford, Chrysler, Renault, American Motors. So I retired out of the automobile business in 1980, and I was officially retired by then. So then I went into playing golf. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm retired. Got my family all raised, and enjoying playing my golf 2 and 3 times a week. Not getting any younger, but I'm hanging in there.